All I did was ask for a glass of water, and my own daughter snapped back. "We are not your servants." She said it inches from my face while I lay drained and barely upright inside the house I had paid for with decades of my life, only hours after coming home from heart surgery. I was her father, the man who had poured every ounce of himself into giving her a good life, and in that moment, the sense of betrayal cut deeper than the surgical pain in my chest. They acted like there would be no consequences, like they had all the control and I had none. What they did not realize was that within a few days, everything would change. When I finally told them they had 72 hours to leave, even I did not fully grasp what would come next. "Could you bring me a glass of water?" I asked, the request slipping out before I had fully settled into the recliner in the living room. 3 long days in the hospital had left me dry in ways that went far beyond simple thirst. Adhesive tape tugged painfully at my chest every time I inhaled, a constant reminder that my heart had nearly failed me and had only just been repaired. Lauren froze in the kitchen doorway. Her face shifted from casual irritation to something colder and more distant. I added quietly, "I just got home from the hospital." My voice sounded thinner than I wanted it to. The drive back from the medical center in early spring traffic had taken more out of me than I expected, and now even speaking felt like climbing a steep hill. She folded her arms across her chest. The movement was sharp and intentional. "We are not your servants." Those words landed harder than any physical blow. I stared at her, searching for even a hint of the little girl who used to run up to me holding dandelions she picked from the backyard. There was nothing there. She looked at me the way someone might look at a stranger asking for spare change outside a grocery store. "I spent 3 days in the hospital after heart surgery," I said slowly, choosing each word with care, as if talking too fast might tear something inside me. "I am asking for water." Her husband, Mark, did not even glance away from the television. The remote rested in his hand like a symbol of authority he had never earned. A loud game show echoed through the room, complete with canned laughter, while my request just hovered there, unanswered. "The kitchen is right there," Lauren said, flicking her hand toward the sink. Her wedding ring flashed in the afternoon sunlight coming through the window. "You have legs." I wrapped my fingers around the chair arms and forced myself upward. The incision across my chest screamed in protest, sending sharp streaks of pain through my torso. My vision blurred, and I had to stop halfway to standing. For a moment it felt like the stitches might tear open, like I might collapse and bleed onto the carpet of my own living room. "Careful, Dad," Lauren said. There was no real concern in her voice, just the kind of empty tone people use when they want to sound decent without actually caring. "We do not need you falling and creating more work for us." More work. As if helping the man who raised her was some inconvenient task dumped into her lap. My mind drifted to memories of carrying her glasses of water when she was sick as a child, sitting up through the night when nightmares stole her sleep. Those memories felt like they belonged to another lifetime, someone else's story. My legs trembled as I took my first step toward the kitchen. Pain shot through my body with every movement, but I refused to sit back down. Not now. Not when the truth was spreading through my mind like dark ink soaking into clean paper. "This is ridiculous," Mark finally said, still staring at the screen. "He is acting like he is dying. It was just a small heart procedure." A small procedure. I had flatlined twice on the operating table. The surgeon had explained the complications, the close calls, how close I had come to never opening my eyes again. Apparently, none of that mattered to them. The kitchen felt impossibly far away, even though it was only a few steps across the room. Each movement became a negotiation between sheer willpower and a body that had not yet caught up with survival. Behind me, I heard Lauren sigh loudly, the same irritated sound she used to make during traffic jams or long checkout lines. "Next thing you know, he will expect us to cook for him too," she muttered. "Do not give him ideas," Mark replied with a dry chuckle that carried no humor at all. I reached the counter and grabbed its edge, letting the cool surface steady me as everything finally clicked into place. These were not comments made out of stress or exhaustion. This was who they were when they thought I did not matter. Maybe they did not even care whether I heard them or not. The glass shook in my hand as I filled it at the sink. The water was ordinary, from the same faucet I had used for over 20 years, yet it tasted bitter when I took my first sip. Nothing in the house had changed, but I knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. When I turned around, they were both watching me. Their expressions held a mix of impatience and barely hidden disgust. My own daughter looked at me like I was an unwanted guest who had overstayed his welcome. The glass felt heavy, not because of its weight, but because of the realization settling deep into my bones like winter cold. I had built this house with my own hands. I had paid for her education, her wedding, their car payments. I had given them everything I had, and they could not even bring me water after heart surgery. I walked back to my chair slowly and deliberately. The pain demanded it, but that was not the real reason. I needed time, to think, to plan, to decide what kind of man I was going to be for whatever years I had left. The late afternoon sun angled lower through the windows, stretching long shadows across the living room floor. Somewhere inside those shadows, something new was forming. Something that would eventually make them understand exactly what they had thrown away the moment they decided I was not worth basic human kindness. I lowered myself into the chair and took another sip of water. It was still bitter, but now there was something else mixed in, something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. They had no idea what was coming. Later, walking toward my bedroom felt like crossing a desert. Each step sent aftershocks through my chest, reminding me that while my body was healing slowly, my illusions had shattered all at once. The hallway seemed longer than usual. Family photos lined the walls, faces smiling back at me, suddenly unfamiliar. I closed the bedroom door and rested against it for a moment. That room had always been my sanctuary, the place where my late wife, Emily, and I had whispered our plans and dreams late into the night. Now it felt like the only refuge left to me in my own home. The bed greeted me like an old friend as I carefully eased myself down, already knowing that this was only the beginning. The incision in my chest flared with sharp reminders of what my body had just been through, but the emotional damage cut far deeper than any surgeon's blade ever could. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying those words again and again until they echoed in my head like a cruel chant. "We are not your servants." My own daughter had looked at me as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience she was forced to tolerate. This was the same daughter whose college tuition I had paid without hesitation, whose wedding had cost me close to $20,000, whose car payments I covered last year when Mark lost his job and they were panicking about making ends meet. Memory has a way of showing up when you finally stop avoiding it. 5 years earlier, after Emily's funeral, I had sat right there in that bedroom and made one of the most important decisions of my life. The insurance payout had been significant, enough to downsize for myself and still give my daughter a solid start in her married life. I remember driving to the real estate office on a gray fall morning, my hands trembling as I signed the transfer paperwork. That house, this house, had been my gift to Lauren and Mark. 3 bedrooms. 2 bathrooms. A finished basement. A yard where I pictured future grandchildren running barefoot while I watched from the porch. "Dad, this is too much," Lauren had whispered that day, tears spilling down her cheeks. We cannot accept this. But I had insisted. I told her that family takes care of family. I reminded her that her mother would have wanted her to feel secure and protected. Mark had shaken my hand with what looked like genuine appreciation, promising that I would always have a home there, that they would look after me when I got older. Those promises felt like smoke now, thin, empty, and gone the moment reality set in. The afternoon light slanted through the curtains, casting familiar shadows across furniture I had purchased decades earlier. Every piece in that room had once been mine. Now it all legally belonged to them, and I was treated like an unwanted visitor in what used to be my own home. My thoughts drifted to all the other times I had opened my wallet without question. When Mark's business idea collapsed and they needed $5,000 immediately to avoid financial disaster. When Lauren decided the kitchen needed a full redesign and the estimate came back at $8,000. When their car broke down and they needed something dependable right away. Every single time I said yes. And every single time they had thanked me, at first. Somewhere along the way, appreciation quietly turned into expectation. Expectation hardened into entitlement. My chest tightened again. I could not tell whether it was the healing incision or the weight of understanding pressing down on me. The pattern was painfully obvious now, and I wondered how I had missed it for so long. They no longer saw me as a man choosing to help out of love. They saw me as a resource, one that came without limits or consequences. The business cards in my wallet suddenly felt heavy with possibility. Thomas Gallagher, attorney at law. I had worked with him during the house transfer and on several other legal matters over the years. He was thorough, steady, and practical, especially when it came to family arrangements and long-term planning. Sitting up took effort, but the decision in my mind was forming fast, like storm clouds rolling in over a clear sky. I reached toward the nightstand where I kept my address book, my fingers moving with more purpose than they had in days. There were options I had never seriously considered before. Legal options. Ones that might finally force them to understand the value of what they had taken for granted. Saturday morning arrived with the sharp clarity that only follows a night without sleep. I called Thomas at exactly 8 o'clock, apologized for bothering him on the weekend, and explained that I needed urgent advice regarding a family situation. His voice carried the same calm professionalism I remembered. "Of course, Mr. Bennett," he said. "Given what you have just been through with your surgery, I can be there by 10. Lauren and Mark left the house around 9:30 for their usual weekend errands. Their departure was loud and carefree, car doors slamming, casual laughter, the sound of a world continuing exactly as it always had for them. The timing could not have been better. Thomas arrived precisely at 10, carrying the same worn leather briefcase he had brought to every meeting over the past 10 years. His gray suit looked like a deliberate sacrifice of a quiet weekend, and his firm handshake reminded me why I trusted him with serious matters. "Please sit wherever you are comfortable," I said, gesturing toward the living room. I was grateful my strength had returned enough to handle what needed to be done. He settled into the chair across from me and opened his briefcase with practiced ease. "You mentioned family concerns on the phone. How can I help?" I had rehearsed this moment during the long hours of the night, carefully choosing words that conveyed urgency without exposing too much emotion. "I need to revisit the legal status of the house I gave my daughter 5 years ago. Specifically, I need to know what options exist if circumstances have changed." Thomas raised his eyebrows slightly but kept his expression neutral. "The property was transferred to Lauren, correct? Let me pull those files." Paper shuffled as he laid documents across my coffee table. The deed transfer. Gift records. Tax filings. All the paperwork that had once seemed simple when love guided my decisions. Now, it looked like a map to territory I had never realized I still had access to. "The house is yours, Mr. Bennet," he said. His words stopped my thoughts cold. "Excuse me? Legally speaking, you retain full ownership rights." He pointed to a specific paragraph in the deed. "The transfer was structured as a conditional gift with reversion clauses. That is standard practice in family property arrangements." My heart rate picked up. Whether it was lingering effects from surgery or the sudden spark of hope, I could not say. "What does that mean?" "It means that while your daughter holds title, the property automatically reverts to you under certain conditions." He turned the document toward me, indicating lines of dense legal language I had signed years earlier without fully absorbing. "Material changes in circumstances, failure to provide agreed upon care or housing, or a breach of family obligations." In that moment, everything shifted. The words on the page blurred for a moment before their meaning finally settled into place. 5 years earlier, Thomas had insisted on those safeguards, calmly explaining them as routine protections. At the time, I barely listened. I had been too focused on helping my daughter secure her future to consider protecting my own. How soon could that kind of reversion actually happen? I asked. Even I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "With the proper documentation showing a change in circumstances, about 30 days from the time notice is filed," Thomas replied. His tone was calm and procedural, as if we were discussing routine paperwork instead of the possible reclamation of my life. "You would need to establish a material breach of the original conditions." My mind immediately went to yesterday's confrontation. Then to the months leading up to it, the growing entitlement, the way I had slowly become invisible in my own home. Calling it a material breach felt almost generous. "What kind of proof would be required?" I asked. "Witness statements, evidence of changed living conditions, and documentation showing failure to meet agreed upon family obligations," he said, stacking the papers neatly. "I should also mention that this requires careful thought. Disputes involving family property can leave permanent damage." Outside the window, I noticed Mrs. Henderson next door tending to her flower beds, moving calmly through her usual Saturday routine. The world was continuing as normal, even as mine quietly tilted on its axis. The house itself felt different now. Knowing it was still legally mine shifted something inside me. I was not nearly as powerless as I had believed. "How long would it take to gather what you need?" I asked. "That depends on what evidence already exists and how quickly you want to act," Thomas said, closing his briefcase but leaving the documents within reach. "Are you thinking about immediate action, or are you simply exploring your options for now?" The question lingered between us, heavy and unresolved. In the distance, I heard the sound of a car pulling onto the street. It was probably too early for Lauren and Mark to be back, but it reminded me that my window for quiet planning was limited. "I think," I said slowly, "that I want to see whether the situation improves before I make any decisions that cannot be undone." Thomas nodded, the look of someone who had guided many families through similar moments. "That is reasonable. Then we should define what that test looks like." That evening, the familiar noises of car doors slamming and shopping bags rustling filled the house. I positioned myself near the kitchen, timing things so my presence would feel natural when they came in. I had spent the afternoon absorbing everything Thomas told me, and now I was ready to run my experiment. Lauren entered first, arms loaded with department store bags. Her designer sunglasses caught the hallway light as she kicked off her shoes without looking at me. Mark followed behind her, juggling his keys and a couple of takeout containers. "How was your day?" I asked, keeping my tone genuinely polite. "Fine," Lauren replied flatly. "Yesterday, That dismissal would have stung. Today, I heard it differently, not as a careless response, but as another entry in a mental ledger. They moved into the kitchen, setting their things down. I waited until they were settled before speaking again. Timing mattered. "Would you mind getting me a glass of water while you are there?" I asked. Lauren froze with her purse halfway open. Annoyance crossed her face instantly. "Can you not get it yourself?" Perfect. Almost a mirror of yesterday. "I am still recovering from surgery," I said evenly. "It would really help." Mark looked up from his phone, irritation clear on his face. "You walked to the kitchen earlier just fine. What is the big deal about walking a few more steps?" I kept my voice calm, even as I mentally recorded every word. "I was hoping for a little consideration for your father who just had heart surgery." "Enough with the dramatics," Mark snapped. "You are not an invalid. Stop acting like one." Lauren nodded, waving her hand dismissively. Her wedding ring flashed under the lights. "Seriously, Dad? You cannot expect us to wait on you just because you had a medical procedure." "A medical procedure? As if my heart stopping twice on an operating table was no different from a routine checkup." I stood slowly, making sure they noticed the effort, the way my hand pressed against my chest, the way I paused to steady myself as the incision throbbed. "I understand," I said quietly, a cold weight settling in my stomach. "So asking for help from my own family is unreasonable. When you can help yourself?" Lauren replied sharply. "Yes. We are not your servants." There it was again. The same phrase that had shattered something inside me the day before, now delivered without hesitation. If anything, they seemed more comfortable saying it this time, as though yesterday had stripped away any need to pretend. I walked to the sink and filled my glass, each step careful and deliberate. Behind me, their evening routine resumed as if nothing had happened, Lauren sorting through her purchases, Mark dropping into his favorite chair and grabbing the remote. The water tasted exactly the same as it had the day before. But this time, I was not drinking it with disappointment. This time, I drank it with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had just collected exactly what he needed. "Did you find everything you were looking for?" I asked as I returned. "Most of it," Lauren said, still focused on her bags. "I will probably need to go back next weekend for that lamp I want for the bedroom." Our bedroom. The bedroom in a house that legally belonged to me. A house she was casually planning upgrades for, using money and comfort she had long stopped appreciating. Every offhand assumption, every dismissive comment, every moment of cold indifference was adding weight to a case Thomas could use. I nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like a good plan." Mark glanced at me, suspicion flickering across his face. "You feeling okay? You seem different today." Different indeed. If only he knew how different things were about to become. That conversation would have to wait for another day, one where every piece was in place and the formal 30-day notice had been properly filed. For now I simply said truthfully, "I am just thinking about family. About what really matters." They seemed satisfied with that answer. Lauren and Mark went back to their evening routines, apparently convinced that I had accepted my position in the order of things. The television glowed with some reality competition show where people fought over money they had done nothing to earn, which felt almost painfully fitting. I finished my water and set the glass down with care. Tomorrow, I would call Thomas again. 20 minutes later, I stood in the doorway of the living room, my decision fully formed and settled. "I need both of you to leave my house." The silence that followed felt electric, like the pause just before lightning strikes. Lauren's magazine slipped from her hands and landed softly on the coffee table. Mark's thumb froze mid-scroll on his phone, his expression shifting from bored detachment to sharp alertness. "What did you just say?" Lauren asked. Her voice carried an edge I had never heard before. "This is my house," I said evenly. "I want you to pack your things and find somewhere else to live." Every word came out clear and controlled, anchored by what Thomas had confirmed that morning. Mark stood up slowly, his height and posture turning confrontational. "You are joking, right? This is our home." "No," I replied calmly. "This is my home. I gave it to you as a gift. And that gift had conditions. You broke them." Lauren jumped to her feet, her face flushed with anger, and something that looked very much like fear. "You cannot just throw us out. We live here. We have rights." "Actually, you do not," I said. The confidence in my voice surprised even me. "I spoke with my attorney this morning. The deed includes reversion clauses. When you failed to provide the care and respect that were part of our agreement, ownership reverted to me." The color drained from Lauren's face as reality hit. No free housing. No financial safety net. No more taking everything for granted while treating me like an inconvenience. "You are bluffing," Mark said, stepping closer, his posture shifting into something more aggressive. "You are just mad about yesterday and trying to scare us." "I am completely serious," I said. "You have 30 days to make other arrangements." Mark let out a short, humorless laugh. 30 days? Where exactly do you think we are supposed to go? Do you have any idea how expensive rent is right now? "That is not my problem anymore," I replied. I stayed standing, even though the incision in my chest had started to ache from the tension. "You made it very clear, yesterday and again today, that helping your recovering father was too much to ask. So I am removing that burden from your lives." Lauren stepped between us, her voice climbing into desperation. "Dad, please. We can fix this. Maybe we were just having a bad day. We can change." "It is too late for that," I said. "You are not going anywhere," Mark shouted, moving to block the doorway. His voice echoed off the walls. "This is insane. You cannot just come in here making demands like you own the place." "I do own the place." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I watched as shock hardened into something darker on both their faces. This was not unfolding the way they had expected. Lauren grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in painfully. "You need to sit down and think this through. You are not thinking clearly after your surgery." "My thinking is perfectly clear," I said, trying to step around her. Mark shifted to block me again. "Where do you think you are going?" "To my bedroom." "To call my lawyer?" "No, you are not!" Before I could react, Mark reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "You are going to sit down," he said coldly, "and we are going to talk about this like adults." My heart rate spiked, sharp pain flaring in my chest as my body protested the stress. "Give me my phone back. When you start making sense." Lauren moved to my other side, and a sick realization crept in. They were coordinating, controlling my movements. "This is insane," I said. "You cannot." "Cannot what?" Mark cut in. "Cannot protect our family from your threats? Cannot stop you from doing something you will regret?" They guided me toward the hallway. Their grip was firm but controlled, and my weakened condition left me unable to fight them both. My recovery had stolen more strength than I wanted to admit. "You are making a serious mistake," I warned as they steered me toward my bedroom. "The only mistake," Lauren said as she pushed the door open, "is letting you work yourself up over nothing." They guided me inside. Mark slipped my phone into his pocket, looking disturbingly satisfied. "We will talk about this tomorrow when you have calmed down," Lauren said. The bedroom door shut with a solid click. A moment later, I heard the unmistakable sound of the lock turning from the outside. 30 minutes of testing the door and checking the window only confirmed what I already knew. I was trapped. The lock held firm. The window opened, but the drop was nearly 15 feet straight down onto concrete, an impossible escape in my condition. But the window offered something else. In the fading evening light, I saw my neighbor, Daniel Brooks, in his backyard, coiling a garden hose as twilight settled over the street. I had known Daniel for about 3 years. He was a decent man, kept his yard tidy, always waved when we passed each other at the mailbox. I pushed the window open wider and positioned myself where he could see me. "Daniel!" I called out, my voice urgent. "Help me!" His head snapped up immediately, scanning for the source of the voice. The moment his eyes met mine through the bedroom window, his expression changed instantly, from confusion to alarm. "Peter, what is wrong?" he called out, dropping the hose and stepping closer to the fence that separated our yards. "I need you to call the police," I said. The words felt unreal leaving my mouth, but this had crossed far beyond a family disagreement. My daughter and her husband locked me in this room and took my phone. Daniel's face hardened into something I had never seen on him before, a mix of disbelief and urgency, like his mind was scrambling to reconcile what he was hearing with the quiet neighborhood we lived in. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "Do you need an ambulance?" "No ambulance," I replied quickly. "Just the police. I am recovering from heart surgery, and they are using that to physically control me." I forced myself to stay calm. I knew panic would only slow things down. Daniel was already pulling out his phone. "Stay right there. I am calling now." Relief washed through me as I watched him dial. For the first time since they locked that door, I felt something close to safety. 911, what is your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice came through his speaker. "I need police," Daniel began, then looked up at me. "4715 Maple Street," I called down. "Tell them it is a family dispute involving unlawful confinement of an elderly man." Daniel repeated everything carefully, adding details about my recent heart surgery and the locked bedroom door. The dispatcher asked follow-up questions, whether I was in immediate danger, how long I had been confined, and Daniel relayed each one to me through the open window. Finally, the dispatcher said, "Officers are being dispatched. Estimated arrival time is 8 to 10 minutes. Daniel ended the call and looked back up at me. "They are on the way." "Do you want me to stay out here until they arrive?" "Yes, please," I said. "And thank you. I know this is not normal." "Do not worry about it," he replied, steady and firm. "Is there anything else I should tell them?" Through the bedroom door, I could hear muted voices from the living room. Lauren and Mark were talking calmly, as if nothing was wrong. They were probably waiting for me to cool down, confident they still had control. "Tell the officers this is also a property dispute," I said carefully. "They are trying to stop me from exercising my legal rights as the homeowner." Daniel nodded. "Understood." A car engine sounded somewhere down the street, too early to be the police, but my heart still sped up. This nightmare was finally moving in my favor. "They should be here any minute," Daniel called up. Footsteps approached from the living room. I heard Lauren's voice, something about checking on me. The timing could not have been more revealing. I moved closer to the door while keeping Daniel in view through the window. The next few minutes would decide whether their attempt to control me through intimidation would collapse or escalate. "I see a police car turning onto Maple," Daniel said. Sudden footsteps rushed down the hallway. The lock clicked, and the door opened. Lauren stood there with a look of concern so polished it could have earned an award. "Dad, are you all right? You seem upset." Her voice was soft, confused, caring, as if she had just discovered me unwell rather than locked inside a room she herself had secured. "The police are here," I said, stepping past her into the hallway. "Police?" she asked, perfectly startled. "Why would the police be here?" Mark appeared from the living room, his face carefully arranged into worried confusion. "Did something happen?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Lauren immediately took my arm, guiding me toward the front door with the gentle grip of a devoted daughter helping her fragile father. "I will get that," she said. She opened the door to reveal two officers, a man and a woman, both in their 30s, both carrying the calm authority of people accustomed to domestic disputes. "Good evening," the male officer said. "I am Officer Reynolds. This is Officer Martinez. We received a call about a family disturbance." "There must be some misunderstanding," Lauren said smoothly. "We are just having a quiet evening. My father recently had heart surgery, so we are being very careful with him." I stepped forward. "Officers, I contacted you through my neighbor because my daughter and her husband locked me in my bedroom and took my phone." Officer Martinez's eyes moved carefully between the three of us, reading posture and proximity. "Sir, can you explain exactly what happened tonight?" "They forced me into my bedroom and locked the door from the outside," I said clearly. "This happened after I told them they needed to leave my house." Lauren clutched her chest in apparent shock. "Dad, that is not true at all. You were dizzy and confused, so we helped you lie down. The door was never locked. You were just struggling with the handle." "It was locked," I said firmly. Mark stepped closer to Lauren, adopting a protective stance. "My father-in-law has been confused since his surgery earlier this week. Anesthesia can affect older patients for days. We are trying to help him, but he has been making accusations that do not make sense." Officer Reynolds pulled out a notebook. "Sir, when was your surgery?" "Monday," I answered. "And I am not confused. They locked me in that room because I told them to leave my house." Lauren sighed gently, the picture of patience. "He has been saying strange things all day. We love him and are doing our best to care for him, but it has been difficult." Officer Martinez glanced around the living room. Everything looked calm, orderly. No visible signs of confrontation. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "do you feel safe in this house?" "Not when they lock me in rooms and take my phone." "We did not take your phone, Dad," Lauren said calmly. She reached into her pocket and held it up. "You left it on the kitchen counter." She placed it in my hand, her expression gentle, almost victorious. And I realized then just how carefully they had planned this moment. "We were charging it for you." The ease with which Lauren delivered that lie almost took my breath away. She handed my phone to Officer Reynolds, who inspected it briefly before passing it back to me. "Mr. Bennett," he asked, "have you been taking any pain medication since your surgery?" "I have," I answered, struggling to keep the frustration out of my voice, "but I am not confused or imagining things." Officer Reynolds glanced at his partner. "Ma'am, has your father shown any other signs of disorientation?" Lauren nodded, her expression carefully sad. "He keeps insisting this is his house and that he wants us to leave, but we live here. We take care of him. Earlier today, he demanded we bring him water and became very upset when we suggested he could get it himself." "Because I just had heart surgery," I said sharply. Mark stepped in smoothly. "We know, sir. But the doctor said light movement is good for recovery." We are only following medical advice. Officer Martinez continued taking notes, while watching us closely. Mr. Bennett, she asked, do you remember what you told your neighbor tonight? Yes, I said firmly. I asked him to call the police because they locked me in my room. He was confused about the door handle. Lauren explained quickly. That door sticks sometimes, especially for someone who is not fully recovered. The officers exchanged a look. In that glance, I saw exactly how they interpreted the scene: an older man recovering from major surgery, possibly affected by medication, making accusations against family members who appeared calm, concerned, and cooperative. Sir, Officer Reynolds said gently, this appears to be a misunderstanding related to post-surgical recovery. If you feel unsafe, you can always call us again, but at this time we do not see evidence of a crime. They stayed another 10 minutes, asking routine questions and writing notes. But the outcome had been decided the moment Lauren produced my phone and blamed everything on medical confusion. After the officers left, the house fell into a heavy, ominous silence. Lauren and Mark stood near the front door. Their faces shifted back to the cold calculation I had seen before. That was a very stupid thing to do, Mark said quietly, his voice carrying a threat no officer had heard. They locked me in my bedroom again. This time, they took everything: my phone, my papers, anything I might use to protect myself. The 90 minutes I spent alone gave me time to think. And my thoughts led me to a decision my body would almost certainly resent. The window called to me. 15 feet to the ground. For someone healthy, it would be manageable. For a man 5 days out of heart surgery, it could end disastrously. Still, remaining imprisoned in my own home felt worse than the risk of falling. I opened the window fully and assessed the drop. Below, a flower bed offered some mercy, soft soil instead of concrete. A small kindness for someone running out of options. From Lauren and Mark's bedroom came the sound of television, laughter, and relaxed conversation. They had returned to their normal evening, confident their performance for the police had solved everything. That confidence would help me. Climbing out the window required strength my surgery had temporarily stolen. Every movement sent sharp reminders through my chest, but the humiliation of being outplayed by my own family burned hotter than the pain. I eased one leg through the opening, then the other, until I sat on the sill like an aging burglar planning the saddest escape imaginable. The ground looked farther away from that angle. I wondered briefly if desperation always felt like this, standing at the edge with no good choices. When I finally let go, the impact rattled every bone in my body. Pain surged through my incision like electricity. I lay still in the flower bed, waiting to see if something had gone terribly wrong. When nothing catastrophic announced itself, I forced myself upright and brushed dirt from my clothes. Moving around the house required care I had not needed since childhood games of hide and seek. I avoided the gravel path and the motion sensor near the garage. My own property had turned into an obstacle course. At the front door, I crouched and lifted the doormat. The spare key sat exactly where I had placed it 3 years earlier. A simple precaution that now felt like providence. My hand trembled slightly as I inserted it into the lock. I could not tell whether it was pain or adrenaline. The door opened silently, the hinges still smooth from when I had oiled them myself the month before. Inside, the house felt different. No longer a prison, but not a home either. It felt like a battlefield after a lost skirmish, with the larger fight still ahead. Voices drifted from the living room. Lauren and Mark were discussing weekend plans, relaxed and unguarded, convinced they had neutralized me. The irony would have been funny if it had not been infuriating. I moved carefully toward my bedroom, avoiding creaky boards and staying out of sight. I was not there to confront them. Not yet. I needed my documents. My attorney's contact information. The legal leverage Thomas had confirmed was mine. The hallway stretched ahead of me like a path toward reclaiming everything they thought they had taken. Each step brought me closer to proof that I was neither confused nor powerless, only temporarily outmaneuvered. In my bedroom, I gathered the deed paperwork, Thomas's business card, and the notes from our morning meeting. With these in hand, the game changed. They were about to learn just how badly they had underestimated me. I returned to my room and waited. The next morning, I climbed out the window again and made my way to Thomas's office. That building, with its polished wood and shelves of legal books, felt like sanctuary, a place of order in a world that had briefly lost its balance. Thomas agreed to meet me at 8 that morning, giving up his day off without hesitation once he understood how urgent the situation had become. "Mr. Bennett," he said as I stepped into his office, studying my face closely, "you look like you have not slept much." He poured coffee from a thermos he had brought from home and slid the cup toward me. "Tell me everything that happened after you left here yesterday." I told him all of it. The confrontation in the living room. Being physically forced into my bedroom. The door locked from the outside. The call to the police that had gone disastrously wrong. The way Lauren and Mark had calmly painted me as confused and unstable while presenting themselves as caring guardians. Thomas listened without interrupting, his pen moving steadily across a legal pad. "So," he said finally, looking up, "they physically confined you in your own bedroom and persuaded responding officers that you were mentally impaired due to recent surgery." "Yes," I said. "They are very good at manipulation, and they used my medical condition as a weapon." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in that familiar attorney's thinking pose. "That changes the situation completely. What we discussed yesterday as a possible course of action has now become necessary." He pulled the folder from our previous meeting and spread the documents across his desk with deliberate precision, like a general laying out a battle plan. "The revocation of the gift deed we discussed is no longer hypothetical," he said. "We are moving forward immediately." I felt a tightness in my chest ease for the first time in days. "How quickly can this happen, given everything I just told you?" "Very quickly," Thomas replied, reaching for a thick legal reference book. "Washington state law is explicit when it comes to gift revocation based on ingratitude. When a recipient treats the donor with hostility or cruelty, or fails to meet implied obligations of care, the gift can be legally rescinded." After nearly 24 hours of feeling powerless, those words felt almost unreal. I could feel control returning. "What does the process actually involve?" I asked. Thomas opened his laptop and began typing. "First, we prepare a formal notice of gift revocation. This document will outline the legal grounds, hostile treatment, failure to provide reasonable care during your medical recovery, and material changes in circumstances that justify reclaiming the property." "And then?" I asked. "Then we serve them with notice," he said without hesitation. "They will have 30 days to vacate the property. If they refuse, we proceed immediately with legal action for unlawful possession." The efficiency of it all was almost intoxicating. Rules. Deadlines. Procedures. Things that could not be erased with tears, lies, or claims of post-surgical confusion. "What if they contest it?" I asked. "They can attempt to," Thomas said calmly, "but the burden shifts to them. They would have to prove their treatment of you was reasonable and that they fulfilled the implicit conditions attached to the gift." A faint, knowing smile crossed his face. "Given what you described, especially the incident involving the police, I doubt they will want this examined closely in a courtroom. For the next hour, he drafted documents while explaining each section in plain terms. The formal language felt like armor, protection against the emotional manipulation that had nearly stripped me of everything. "The notice of gift revocation will be ready to serve tomorrow morning," he said, printing multiple copies on official letterhead. "I strongly recommend using a professional process server instead of delivering it yourself." "And if they claim I am mentally incompetent?" I asked. "That actually strengthens our position," Thomas replied, stacking the papers neatly. "Their statements to the police suggesting you were confused due to surgery could be interpreted as elder abuse, using your medical condition to undermine your lawful property rights." The irony was almost perfect. Their attempt to control me had created evidence of the very behavior that justified taking the house back. "How long until this is final?" I asked. "If they do not contest it, and I suspect they will not once they understand the seriousness, you could regain full possession within 60 days, he said. "However, the psychological impact will be immediate. They will realize their control was never real." As I stood to leave, I felt something I had not experienced since before the surgery. Hope. Real, solid optimism. "Thomas, thank you for meeting me on such short notice," I said. "What they did to you was unacceptable," he replied firmly. "I am glad we can set it right." He handed me an envelope containing copies of the legal documents. "I will call you tomorrow once the process server is scheduled." Walking toward the office door, it finally sank in just how much had changed. I was no longer a confused old man making desperate claims. I was a property owner asserting his legal rights with professional representation and the full weight of the law behind him. The drive home gave me time to think carefully about the next phase. Monday morning arrived with crisp clarity and official documents printed on Thomas Gallagher's letterhead. I stood in the living room holding papers that would alter everything, waiting for the right moment to speak. Lauren was in the kitchen making coffee, moving with the easy confidence of someone who believed the house belonged to her. Mark sat at the dining table scrolling through his phone, planning his day without the slightest awareness that his world was about to collapse. "Lauren." "Mark," I said evenly. "I need both of you in here." My voice carried something new, authority. Not the weakened, apologetic tone of a recovering patient asking for water, but the calm certainty of a man who finally understood his position. They exchanged glances and walked into the living room. Lauren looked mildly annoyed, as if I were interrupting something trivial. I raised the documents, making sure the letterhead and legal formatting were impossible to miss. "These are eviction notices," I said. "You have 72 hours to remove yourselves and all of your belongings from my property." The silence that followed was absolute. Lauren's coffee mug froze halfway to her mouth, suspended in disbelief. Mark's phone went dark as his fingers loosened around it. "What are you talking about?" Lauren asked. For the first time since Friday, uncertainty crept into her voice. "I am talking about the legal reality you chose to ignore," I said. I unfolded the first document and read aloud, letting the words carry their full weight. Notice of gift revocation. Pursuant to Washington state property law, the undersigned property owner hereby revokes the gift deed executed in favor of Lauren Bennett on the grounds of material ingratitude and breach of implied conditions. Mark shot to his feet. "You cannot be serious. This house is ours. We live here." "You lived here at my discretion," I replied evenly, "and you forfeited that privilege the moment you decided to treat me like an unwelcome stranger in my own home." I continued reading. Specific grounds include hostile treatment of the grantor, failure to provide reasonable care during medical recovery, and deliberate confinement against the grantor's will. Lauren set her mug down with trembling hands. Dad, this is insane. You cannot just throw us out. We have nowhere to go. That stopped being my concern, I said. And saying it felt strangely freeing. You had every opportunity to treat your recovering father with basic human decency. Instead, you chose cruelty and manipulation. But the police said you were confused. Mark protested, his voice rising. You were having post-surgical issues. The police said what you convinced them to say, I answered. My attorney was very interested in that detail, especially how you used my medical condition to dismiss legitimate concerns about my property rights. I read the final section aloud. Failure to vacate within 72 hours will result in formal eviction proceedings and potential charges of unlawful possession. Lauren collapsed into a chair, her face drained of color. You actually went to a lawyer? I went to my lawyer, I said. The same attorney who handled the original gift deed 5 years ago. He was very interested in learning how you have been treating the man who provided your free housing. Dad, please, Lauren said, her voice breaking for the first time. Real fear had finally replaced arrogance. We can fix this. We can change. We know we messed up. 72 hours, I said, folding the papers back into the official envelope. Starting now. Mark stepped closer, his posture hardening. You really think you can threaten us after everything we have done for you? Everything you have done for me? I repeated. The irony was almost overwhelming. You locked me in a bedroom and convinced police officers that I was mentally incompetent. So tell me, what exactly have you done for me? We let you live here. Lauren shot back weakly. You let me live in my own house, I replied. I placed the envelope on the coffee table where they could not avoid seeing it. The house I bought with my own money and gave to you because I believed you would provide the love and care that made such generosity worthwhile. The room went silent except for the sound of Lauren's uneven breathing. The documents sat between us like a line they could not cross, separating their old world of entitlement from the reality they were now facing. Where are we supposed to go? Mark asked. His voice was noticeably smaller. That is something you should have considered before deciding I was not worth basic human kindness. I turned toward the hallway. 2 hours. The clock is ticking. Behind me, I heard Lauren begin to cry and Mark's voice rise as he started making frantic phone calls. Their panic filled the house, and for the first time in years, it did not hurt. It felt earned. But I was not finished. They still did not understand the full weight of what they had taken, or why this house mattered the way it did. Tuesday afternoon, we sat around the kitchen table like a family again, though nothing about us felt the same. Lauren's eyes were swollen from crying. Mark looked exhausted, like he had not slept in days. The eviction notice lay between us like a ticking device. Dad, please, Lauren said. We know we were wrong. We know we treated you badly. But we can change. We can be the family you deserve. I listened without interrupting. In front of me sat a manila folder I had pulled from my filing cabinet that morning, documents they had never seen. We were stressed about your surgery, Mark added, leaning forward. We handled it badly, but that does not mean we do not love you. This is our home. Our family. Our home? I repeated quietly. Lauren, do you remember how I was able to buy this house in the first place? She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. You said you saved the money from your contracting business. That is partly true, I said. But where do you think the down payment came from? A house like this, in this neighborhood, required a substantial amount of front. They exchanged glances. I do not know, Lauren said. Your savings? I opened the manila folder and spread the documents across the table. Official letterhead from Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company. Death certificates. Beneficiary claim forms. All dated 5 years earlier. This house was purchased with the life insurance money from your mother's death, I said. The silence that followed was complete. Lauren stared at the papers as if they were written in another language. Confusion crossed her face, then disbelief, and finally a slow, dawning horror that was painful to witness. Your mother carried that policy for 20 years, I continued, specifically to make sure our family would be secure. I pointed to the beneficiary designation. $350,000, I said. Paid out 6 months after the funeral. Lauren's hands shook as she lifted the documents. You never told me. I did not tell you, I said quietly, because I did not want you living in a house bought with your mother's death feeling guilty or burdened. I wanted it to feel like a gift from a father's love, not from tragedy. Mark leaned over her shoulder, scanning the paperwork. I do not understand, he said. Why are you telling us this now? I met their eyes. Because I want you to understand exactly what you did. I kept my voice steady, but every word carried the weight of 5 years of grief, restraint, and careful decisions. This house, the one where you locked me in a bedroom, told police I was mentally incompetent, and refused to bring me a glass of water after heart surgery, was bought with your mother's life insurance money. Lauren let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. The insurance papers slipped from her hands and scattered across the table. I watched her shoulders shake as the truth finally landed. She died believing she was protecting our family. I continued quietly. In her final weeks, she talked about it constantly. How that policy would make sure we always had a safe place to live. How we would take care of one another no matter what. I gathered the documents back into a neat stack. She made me promise to use that money to keep our family together. Dad, I did not know, Lauren said, her voice breaking completely. You did not know because I protected you from that burden, I replied. The same way your mother protected us with that policy. I protected you by giving you this house as a gift instead of telling you it was paid for with her sacrifice. Mark wrapped an arm around Lauren as she began to cry openly. We can make this right, he said. We can honor her memory the right way. Can you? I asked softly. Can you undo treating me like a stranger in a house your mother's death paid for? Can you take back telling police officers that I was confused and incompetent in the place she intended to be our family's sanctuary? Lauren looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I am so sorry. I am truly sorry. I had no idea. Your mother would have been devastated, I said. To know that the house she believed would hold our family together became the place where her daughter chose cruelty instead of compassion. I stood up, leaving the insurance documents on the table. She would have been heartbroken to see her final gift used as a weapon against the man she loved. The moral weight of it all settled over them like a heavy blanket. This was no longer just a legal fight or a family disagreement. It was about violating the trust of a woman who died believing her sacrifice would protect the people she loved most. What can we do? Lauren whispered. How do we fix this? I looked at my daughter, shattered, desperate, finally aware of what she had lost, and felt something that might have been pity mixed with the quiet satisfaction of justice. You have 44 hours, I said simply. By Thursday afternoon, the house echoed with the sound of cardboard boxes being taped shut and furniture sliding across hardwood floors. I sat in my recliner, watching Lauren and Mark work with the subdued efficiency of people who had accepted reality. The last 50 hours had changed them completely. The arrogance and entitlement were gone. In their place was genuine remorse mixed with exhaustion, the look of people who had learned, too late, what it meant to lose everything. Mark carried the final box through the living room without meeting my eyes. Lauren followed with a suitcase, moving carefully, as though the house itself might collapse beneath her feet. "That is everything from upstairs," she said quietly, setting the suitcase near the door. I nodded but did not speak. There was nothing left to say that had not already been said when the insurance papers shattered their illusions. The house keys lay on the coffee table between us, still attached to the keychain Lauren had bought when I first gave her the house 5 years earlier, a small silver charm engraved with the words "Home Sweet Home." The irony was almost painful. "Dad," Lauren said, approaching with hesitant steps, "I need you to know that I understand now. What we did. What I did." I looked at her, my daughter, who had spent the past 72 hours confronting the truth of her cruelty in a house bought with her mother's death. "I know you do," I said. Mark appeared in the doorway, keys in hand. "Everything is loaded. We are ready." Lauren picked up the house keys and held them for a moment, as if they weighed far more than metal ever should. When she placed them in my hand, her fingers trembled. "These belong to you," she whispered. "They always did," I replied. She nodded, understanding the deeper truth in those words. This house had always been mine, legally, morally, and in every way that mattered. She had lived here by my generosity, and she had repaid it with contempt. "I'm sorry about Mom," she said softly. "I am sorry we dishonored her memory in the house she provided for us. Your mother would have wanted you to treat me with love and respect," I said calmly. "She would have been heartbroken by the choice you made instead." Mark stepped forward and extended his hand. "Mr. Bennett, I take full responsibility for my part in this. I supported her behavior. I participated in treating you badly. That was wrong." I shook his hand briefly. "Now you understand what it means to lose a home." The words carried perfect symmetry. They had made me feel unwelcome in my own house, reduced me to a burden in the one place I should have felt safe. Now they would learn what it meant to have no place that truly belonged to them. They walked toward the door together. Lauren paused at the threshold and looked back one last time. "Will you ever forgive us?" "That is not the question you should be asking," I said. "The real question is whether you will remember this well enough to treat the next person with the kindness you should have shown me." The door closed behind them with a quiet final click. Through the window, I watched them load the remaining boxes into their car and drive away from the property that would never again be their home. Silence settled over the house, warm and reassuring. For the first time in nearly a week, I was alone without tension, without fear, without being treated like an intruder in my own life. I looked at the keys in my hand, then at the insurance papers still spread across the table. Emily would have been proud. Her sacrifice had done what she intended. It had protected our family, even if it took time and painful lessons to get there. As I walked through the rooms, truly my rooms again, I felt something I had not felt since before my surgery. Peace. Not the shallow peace of revenge, but the deeper calm that comes when justice is served and boundaries are finally respected. Outside, the spring afternoon eased toward evening. And I was home.